Frozen alien wolves begged a human veteran for refuge. What happened next stunned him. Jack Harrow trudged through the endless white expanse of Cryovast, his boots crunching against the thick layer of ice and snow. The wind was harsh, slicing through the layers of his cold-weather gear as if it had its own teeth. He had walked these frozen plains countless times before, hunting whatever meager food the planet could provide and scavenging scraps from the abandoned outposts left behind by earlier settlers. Cryovast was not kind to humans, or any living being for that matter. The temperatures could drop so low that a single misstep could mean instant death. But Jack was no ordinary human. He was a veteran, shaped by war, hardship, and endless survival. His body was scarred, his eyes tired but sharp, and his mind always alert. He had faced impossible odds before, but Cryovast had a way of testing even the strongest. That morning, as he moved along a narrow canyon of ice, Jack heard something unusual. It was faint at first, barely audible over the howling wind. A whimper or maybe a growl, something alive. He froze, his hand instinctively going to the blaster strapped to his hip. His senses, honed over decades of conflict, picked up a rhythm in the sound. It was weak, frightened, and coming closer. He squinted through the snow, scanning the horizon, looking for movement. Suddenly, a flash of motion caught his eye. Two shapes struggled through the snow, moving awkwardly as if every step was agony. They were unlike any creatures he had ever seen. About the size of a large wolf, with fur that shimmered faintly even under Cryovast's pale sunlight. Their bodies were lean but muscular, designed for survival in harsh conditions. And their eyes, glowing a soft, amber color, intelligent and pleading. Jack instinctively raised his blaster. "Stay back," he warned, though he had no idea if they could understand him. The creatures stopped and looked at him, trembling. Their breath steamed in the cold air, and Jack noticed that they were injured, deep gashes along their limbs, frostbitten patches of fur, and a slow, labored gait that suggested exhaustion. Then it happened. A voice not spoken but felt, a presence in his mind. He froze, his finger hovering over the trigger. The wolves, or whatever they were trying to communicate. Images, emotions, desperation, flooding into his mind without words. They were begging for refuge. They were hunted, and they needed him. Jack took a deep breath. He had faced alien species before, most of them hostile. He had killed more than he could count. But something about these creatures stirred a long-forgotten part of him, a part that remembered what it felt like to be hunted and alone. He lowered his weapon slightly. "All right," he said aloud, though the wind carried his words away. "Let's get you inside." The wolves hesitated, but eventually allowed him to guide them. He used ropes and a makeshift sled to pull the weaker one, while the other limped beside him, struggling to stay upright. Every step was difficult, and the wind seemed determined to push them back, but Jack refused to stop. Hours passed, and by the time they reached his small cabin, Jack's body ached, but he felt a strange satisfaction. He had saved lives today, even if they weren't human. Inside the cabin, the warmth was immediate, almost overwhelming. The wolves shook off the snow, their fur steaming in the heat. Jack offered them water in a metal bowl, and they drank cautiously, glancing at him with eyes that radiated gratitude. He moved to the small stove and prepared a basic meal, sharing some preserved rations. They sniffed the food and then began eating, their movements careful and deliberate. As they ate, Jack observed them closely. They were beautiful in a wild, alien way, with sleek bodies built for endurance and survival. But more than that, he sensed intelligence, an awareness that went beyond instincts. He remembered stories from old war campaigns of alien species that could communicate, plan, and even strategize. But these creatures seemed different, peaceful perhaps, forced into violence by circumstance. After the meal, the smaller wolf, its fur a pale, almost silvery shade, stepped forward. Again, the telepathic communication came, clearer this time. It shared images of its home planet, lush and green, filled with creatures of all kinds, thriving in harmony. And then the horror, fleets of Zarkan ships, burning villages, capturing or killing everything in their path. These wolves were scouts, refugees from genocide, and Jack was the first being to show them mercy. Jack listened, feeling a pang of sympathy. He had seen atrocities, too, on countless battlefields, and he knew the weight of survival. "I get it," he muttered, more to himself than to them. "I've been hunted too, once or twice." He poured himself a cup of water, sitting on a worn chair, watching them. Trust was difficult to earn on Cryovast, but these creatures had shown it immediately, in their vulnerability. Over the next few days, Jack tended to their injuries, using bandages, heat packs, and whatever medical supplies he had. The wolves adapted quickly to the cabin, moving with grace and quiet intelligence. He discovered that they could sense changes in the environment, approaching storms, hidden crevasses, and even distant movement in the ice plains. Their abilities complemented his own skills perfectly. Together, they could survive where any human alone would perish. At night, the wolves would sit by the window, staring out into the frozen darkness. Jack often joined them, sharing stories of past battles, of comrades lost and victories hard-won. He found himself talking more to them than he had to any human in years. The connection was strange, yet comforting. In the silence of Cryovast, they were his companions, his allies in a world that was indifferent to survival. Then came the first sign of danger. From the edge of the canyon, he noticed movement, small, fast, precise. The Zarkan patrols. The wolves stiffened, their ears twitching, eyes glowing brighter. Jack's instincts kicked in. He knew that these creatures were not just prey, they were hunted by a force that did not forgive, did not rest. The wind carried the faint metallic scent of Zarkan technology. They were close, too close. Jack's mind raced. He had survived countless ambushes, but the Zarkan forces were different. Advanced, merciless, and equipped with technology that could track life signs across kilometers of ice. But he was not alone. The wolves, despite their injuries, moved with a grace and precision that defied belief. Kairal, the larger one, circled the cabin, scanning the horizon, while Vera, the smaller, used her abilities to blend almost seamlessly with the snow. They were ready to fight, to survive. Jack prepared traps and barricades. He knew the Zarkans would not hesitate to kill anything in their path. He rigged explosives with a careful hand, using ice and snow as camouflage. Every detail mattered. Survival was not guaranteed, but they had a chance. And with the wolves at his side, his odds improved significantly. Hours later, the howls of the approaching patrol echoed across the frozen plains. Jack and the wolves held their positions, hearts pounding, breaths visible in the cold air. This was the moment where experience, instinct, and trust would determine their fate. The first Zarkan scout appeared, and Jack triggered the trap. Snow and ice exploded, sending shards flying. The wolf leapt forward, faster than any human could, taking the enemy by surprise. The fight was brutal but calculated. Together, human and wolves moved as one, each anticipating the other's movements, covering weaknesses, exploiting strengths. By the time the last scout fell, Jack was exhausted, but the wolves stood beside him, unharmed. They had survived. Together, and in that moment, Jack realized something profound. Cryovast had tested him as it tested all who walked its plains. But survival was not just about strength. It was about connection, trust, and adaptation. The wolves had not just begged for refuge. They had shown him the value of allies, of working together against impossible odds. As dawn broke over Cryovast, casting pale golden light across the ice, Jack looked at the wolves. Kairal's amber eyes met his, and he understood without words. They were more than companions now. They were family, forged not by blood, but by survival, courage, and the will to endure. And somewhere deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. The frozen world stretched endlessly before them, harsh and unforgiving. But for the first time in years, Jack felt hope. Hope that humans, even alone on the edge of the universe, could make a difference. Hope that survival was not just about enduring, but about inspiring loyalty, trust, and unity across species. And as the wind howled across Cryovast, carrying the distant echoes of unseen dangers, Jack smiled. They were ready. Together, nothing could stop them. The day after the battle with the Zarkan scouts, Cryovast was quiet. The wind still cut through the frozen plains, but the silence was different now. It felt like the planet itself was holding its breath. Jack Harrow moved through the cabin, checking supplies, cleaning weapons, and tending to the wolves. Kairal and Vera had recovered from their injuries remarkably fast. The warmth of the cabin, combined with the careful attention Jack gave, seemed to heal them beyond what their alien physiology might have allowed. Jack watched them cautiously. There was an intelligence in their movements, a sharp awareness that reminded him of seasoned soldiers. Kairal stretched, testing his limbs, and then padded silently toward the small window, scanning the horizon. Vera remained closer to Jack, occasionally pressing her head against his side, a gesture that seemed to communicate trust and gratitude. Jack wasn't used to companionship. Most of his life had been solitude, punctuated by fleeting alliances on battlefields across distant star systems. But this was different. These creatures were not just allies, they were sentient beings, capable of thought, strategy, and feeling. As he prepared another basic meal, the smaller wolf, Vera, approached him. Again, a voice, not spoken but felt in his mind, reached out to him. Jack had learned to accept it, though it still unnerved him sometimes. This time, the communication was clear, almost deliberate. Images flooded his mind. A lush green planet, forests filled with creatures of all shapes and sizes, crystal-clear rivers, and towering mountains. Jack could feel the warmth, the calm, the beauty of it. And then the horror came. Images of fire, destruction, ships descending from the sky, beams of energy vaporizing everything in their path. The faces of the wolves' kin, terrified and desperate, burned into his mind. Jack staggered back, gripping the counter. "I see," he muttered aloud. He had seen atrocities before in wars across human colonies, but the scale of this genocide was staggering. "You've lost everything." Vera's presence softened the memory. She did not need words to convey sorrow, only her posture, the quiet pulse of her being. Jack felt a strange kinship. He knew what it was to lose comrades, to fight and watch others fall while survival required he move forward. Carol stepped forward, and Jack felt another wave of communication, this one less about horror and more about strategy and survival. The wolves had not just escaped. They were scouts, trained to navigate hostile terrain, track enemies, and find safe routes for others. They were exceptional hunters, but also refugees. Jack realized that harboring them wasn't just a moral choice, it was a strategic one. They could help him survive, and he could help them fight back. Over the next days, Jack trained with them in ways that challenged his own understanding. They moved like shadows through the snow, disappearing and reappearing as if the wind itself obeyed them. He noticed their heightened senses, smells, sounds, and vibrations he could not detect. They could anticipate danger, sense shifts in the wind, even detect faint electromagnetic signals from distant ships. Jack began to understand that these creatures were far more than animals. They were living weapons, capable of adapting and learning with an almost human-like intelligence. At the same time, Jack shared his knowledge with them. He taught them the intricacies of human weapons, strategies, and traps. Together, they improved the cabin's defenses, making it almost impossible for anyone to approach unseen. Ice trenches, tripwires, and cleverly disguised pits became their new reality. Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. For years, he had survived alone, relying on his own skills, but now he had partners, allies who could match his instincts and extend his reach beyond what he thought possible. But the peace was fragile. One morning, while Jack and the wolves were surveying the plains, they detected distant movement, a patrol of Zarkan drones scanning the area for life signs. Jack crouched low, pointing toward the horizon. The wolves' ears twitched, their eyes glowing faintly as they focused on the distant shapes. Carol growled softly, not a sound for humans, but a warning. Jack nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. They had to act carefully. The Zarkans were relentless and technologically superior, and one mistake could mean death. Jack observed the patrol, noting patterns, timing, and weaknesses. The wolves communicated in subtle ways, shifting positions, alerting him to hazards he could not detect. They were synchronized, moving as one unit, each anticipating the other's actions. Jack felt a surge of respect. These creatures were not just survivors, they were warriors. As the patrol came closer, Jack implemented a plan. Using the terrain, he created false trails, confusing the drone's sensors. Snow and ice were used to reflect signals, making them appear to move in multiple directions at once. The wolves spread out, invisible in the blizzard, ready to strike at the exact moment. Jack's heart pounded in his chest, a familiar rhythm from countless battles, but this time he was not alone. The drones passed the cabin without detecting them, but Jack knew this was only the beginning. The Zarkans would return, stronger, more prepared, and possibly with reinforcements. He needed more than traps. He needed an edge, a way to fight back. That night, as he sat by the small fire, he considered the wolves' abilities. Their senses, speed, and intelligence were extraordinary, but there was something more, something latent that they had not yet revealed. He could feel it in the air around them, a potential energy waiting to be unlocked. Vera approached him and pressed her head against his shoulder. Once again, images and emotions filled his mind. They wanted to show him something, a bond, a deeper connection. Jack hesitated at first, uncertain, but then allowed it. The experience was overwhelming. Memories of the wolves' lives, their planet, and their struggles intertwined with his own experiences. He felt their fears, hopes, and determination. In return, they sensed his courage, his resilience, and his tactical mind. The bond was not permanent but temporary, a merging of instincts and emotions that enhanced both sides. When it ended, Jack was breathless. He felt stronger, more aware, and somehow faster. The wolves, too, seemed different, more attuned to his presence, more confident in their abilities. He realized that this bond could be the key to surviving Cryovast and confronting the Zarkans. Humanity, he thought, had always been underestimated. Alone, he was capable, but together with these creatures, he could achieve far more. Over the next few days, Jack and the wolves practiced the bond repeatedly, each session increasing their coordination and understanding. They moved through the ice fields with near-perfect synchronization, communicating without words, sensing each other's intentions. Jack marveled at the efficiency and precision. He had fought alongside human squads before, but nothing compared to this. These wolves were not just allies, they were extensions of himself, partners in survival and combat. Then came the first real test. A larger Zarkan force appeared on the horizon, armed with energy weapons and sensors far more advanced than the previous patrol. Jack and the wolves observed them carefully. The enemy was methodical, scanning for life signs, moving in a grid pattern designed to flush out any survivors. Jack whispered instructions, and the wolves responded instantly, moving into positions that maximized cover and advantage. The battle was intense. Jack used the environment, leading the Zarkans into traps, while Karal and Vera struck from the shadows, exploiting weaknesses. Ice shards flew, energy blasts ricocheted, and the snowstorm became both shield and weapon. Jack felt a rush of exhilaration, the kind only experienced in life-or-death situations. But this time, he was not alone. The wolves' abilities, combined with his tactics, allowed them to overcome forces that should have been unbeatable. After the battle, the frozen plains were quiet again, littered with remnants of the Zarkan scouts. Jack and the wolves survived, but they knew this was only the beginning. The Zarkans would adapt, and their pursuit would not end. Cryovast, harsh and unforgiving, had become their proving ground. Together, they had survived impossible odds, and in doing so, they had forged a bond that went beyond species, beyond survival. Jack sat by the fire that night, staring into the flames. Karal and Vera lay beside him, their bodies radiating warmth and strength. He realized that survival was not just about skill or technology. It was about trust, connection, and the courage to act when everything seemed lost. The wolves had trusted him, and he had trusted them. That trust had made them stronger, smarter, faster. In the silence of the night, Jack made a decision. They could not hide forever. The Zarkans would continue their hunt, and Cryovast, as brutal as it was, could not contain the threat indefinitely. They had to take the fight to the enemy to protect not just themselves but other survivors, other innocent lives. Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had survived countless battles, but this one mattered more. This was not just survival. It was a chance to fight for justice, for hope, for life itself. As dawn approached, painting the frozen plains in pale gold, Jack and the wolves prepared to move. Karal and Vera were ready, their instincts sharpened, their trust in him absolute. Jack felt a sense of awe and responsibility. They were not just companions. They were a team, bound by fate, forged in survival, and united by a shared purpose. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, and nothing could break their bond. Cryovast stretched endlessly before them, harsh and beautiful, filled with dangers yet also opportunities. Jack smiled faintly, feeling the weight of his responsibility and the exhilaration of possibility. For the first time in years, he felt alive in a way that was more than mere survival. He felt part of something greater. He felt hope. And with Karal and Vera by his side, he knew that whatever the universe threw at them next, they would endure. Together, they were unstoppable. The wind on Cryovast had grown colder, harsher than usual, as if the planet itself was aware of what was about to unfold. Jack Harrow, Karal, and Vera moved carefully across the frozen plains, scanning the horizon for any sign of the Zarkan forces. The scouts they had defeated days earlier were only the beginning. The main patrol, larger and far more organized, was closing in. Jack's mind was sharp, cataloging every potential trap, every possible advantage the terrain could provide. He had survived countless battles, but this pursuit was different. This time he wasn't fighting alone. The wolves, moving with unnatural grace through the snow, were attuned to every shift in the wind, every vibration in the ice beneath their feet. Kairal led the way, his glowing amber eyes scanning the distance, while Vera stayed closer to Jack, her senses complementing his own. Jack could feel their presence, their thoughts brushing against his own mind, warning him of dangers he could not yet see. He had learned to trust them, to act as one with them. The bond they had formed was stronger than any human alliance he had known, and it gave him a confidence that bordered on exhilaration. Suddenly, movement flickered at the edge of the storm. Jack froze, lowering his body to the snow. The Zarkans had found them. A patrol of at least a dozen ships, hovering just above the icy surface, scanning for life signs with relentless precision. Jack's mind raced. There was no time to escape undetected. The wolves shifted, crouching, their muscles coiled like springs. Kairal growled softly, a low warning that sent a shiver down Jack's spine. He nodded, understanding the gravity of the moment. The first wave of scouts descended, their energy weapons scanning for heat signatures. Jack ducked behind a ridge, signaling to the wolves. Vera moved first, slipping into the snow like a shadow, her presence almost invisible even to the advanced Zarkan sensors. Kairal followed, leaping across the ridge and disappearing into the storm. Jack took a deep breath, his hands steady on his blaster. The battle had begun. Jack triggered the first of his traps. Ice shards exploded upward, cutting through the snow and scattering the patrol. Energy blasts ricocheted off the frozen cliffs, illuminating the storm in brief flashes. The wolves struck simultaneously. Vera leapt from cover, moving faster than any human could track, taking down two scouts with precision strikes that left no chance of retaliation. Kairal circled behind the remaining patrol, using the terrain to his advantage, striking from unexpected angles and disappearing before the Zarkans could respond. Jack moved with calculated precision, combining his own skills with the wolves' instincts. Together, they became a force that no single species could match. Snow, ice, and wind became their allies, masking their movements and amplifying their power. The Zarkans, advanced and ruthless though they were caught off guard by the coordination between human and alien. Every strike was deliberate, every movement anticipating the enemy's response. Jack felt a thrill, a combination of fear and exhilaration that only came in life-or-death situations where the outcome depended on trust and timing. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. The storm intensified, creating near-zero visibility. Jack and the wolves used this to their advantage, moving silently through the snow, tracking the Zarkans without being detected. They discovered that the patrol was not only searching for the wolves but also scanning for any sign of Jack. The realization sharpened his resolve. He had been hunted before, but never like this. Never by an enemy so relentless, so adaptive. Using the wolves' heightened senses, Jack identified a weak point in the patrol's formation, a narrow ice canyon where the Zarkans' ships could not maneuver effectively. He signaled the wolves, and they moved as one, slipping into the canyon and setting up an ambush. Jack rigged explosives along the ice walls, using every scrap of his knowledge and experience. The plan was risky. One misstep could trap them in the canyon with no escape. But the wolves' presence, their instincts, and their telepathic coordination gave him the confidence to act. When the Zarkans entered the canyon, Jack triggered the traps. Ice walls collapsed, blocking their retreat and crushing the first wave of drones. The wolves moved with deadly precision, striking from angles the Zarkans could not anticipate. Energy blasts ricocheted off ice, creating confusion and panic among the enemy ranks. Jack himself moved like a ghost, striking when necessary and retreating into cover before the Zarkans could respond. The synergy between him and the wolves was flawless, each action amplifying the other's effectiveness. Amid the chaos, Jack noticed something remarkable. The wolves were evolving, adapting in real time. Their movements were no longer just instinctive, they were strategic, almost human in their complexity. Vera leapt from one ice ledge to another, knocking out a patrol drone with a perfectly timed strike. Kairal moved behind enemy lines, using the collapsing ice to funnel the remaining forces into a trap. Jack felt a sense of awe and pride. These creatures, once hunted and desperate, were now unstoppable when united with human ingenuity. After what felt like an eternity, the last of the Zarkan patrol was destroyed or forced to retreat. The canyon was silent once more, except for the howling wind. Jack, exhausted but exhilarated, lowered himself to the snow. The wolves returned to him, their bodies radiating warmth despite the freezing temperatures. K'Rol nuzzled his shoulder, and Vera pressed her head against his chest, sharing a moment of quiet triumph. They had survived not by strength alone, but by trust, coordination, and understanding. As night fell, Jack surveyed the aftermath. The frozen canyon bore the scars of their battle, ice shattered and scattered, energy blasts etched into the walls. He realized that Cryovast, harsh and unforgiving, had become their proving ground. Every trial, every challenge had forged a bond stronger than anything he had known. The wolves were no longer merely companions. They were extensions of himself, partners in survival and combat. The universe might underestimate humanity, but Jack understood that combined with allies like K'Rol and Vera, humans could achieve extraordinary feats. That night, as they rested inside a cavern protected from the storm, Jack allowed himself a moment to reflect. He had faced impossible odds before, fought against enemies stronger and more numerous than himself, but never had he experienced anything like this partnership. The wolves' telepathic abilities, their instincts, their intelligence, all amplified his own skills, creating a synergy that was more than the sum of its parts. He realized that this bond, this connection across species, was the key to surviving Cryovast and defeating the Zarkans. Vera communicated again, sharing images of the wider conflict. Jack saw glimpses of Zarkan operations across other planets, the systematic hunting and extermination of peaceful species, and the technological might that seemed insurmountable. But alongside these images came something else: hope. The wolves had survived against impossible odds. If they could endure, so could he. And together they could fight back, not just for themselves, but for all who were threatened by the Zarkan Empire. The next morning, the trio moved out of the canyon, following a planned route that would allow them to strike the enemy while minimizing risk. Jack had learned to trust the wolves' instincts completely. They led him through hidden paths, avoiding patrols, ice fissures, and deadly traps. The bond they shared allowed them to move as one, anticipating each other's thoughts and actions. For Jack, this was more than survival, it was evolution. He had become part of something greater, something stronger than any human unit could achieve alone. As they advanced, they encountered more signs of the Zarkan presence: abandoned equipment, scorched ice, and energy residue from previous battles. Jack noted every detail, mapping potential threats and opportunities. The wolves moved silently beside him, their senses guiding the way. Jack realized that Cryovast, for all its dangers, had also provided them with an advantage. The planet's harsh conditions were second nature to the wolves, and with Jack's knowledge of tactics and traps, they could turn every challenge into an opportunity. By mid-afternoon, they spotted a larger Zarkan unit moving toward a nearby settlement. Jack knew that an outright confrontation would be dangerous, but he also recognized an opportunity. This was their chance to strike a blow against the Empire, to protect innocents and weaken the enemy's morale. He signaled to the wolves, and they prepared for another coordinated strike. K'Rol and Vera moved into position with lethal precision, while Jack set traps and mapped the battlefield. Every action was calculated, every movement deliberate. When the battle began, it was chaos controlled by skill. The Zarkans, advanced as they were, had never encountered opponents like Jack and his alien allies. Snow and ice became weapons, traps and ambushes shattered formations, and the combined instincts of human and wolves overwhelmed even the most disciplined units. Jack moved with a focus he had never known, every decision amplified by the wolves' guidance. They struck, retreated, and struck again, leaving no room for error. By the time the battle ended, the settlement was safe, and the Zarkans were forced to retreat. Jack and the wolves, battered but victorious, surveyed the results. They had not just survived, they had triumphed. The partnership between human and alien had proven that intelligence, trust, and courage could overcome even the most technologically advanced foes. Jack felt a deep sense of pride and responsibility. This was just the beginning of their fight, but they had already shown that they could make a difference. As night fell on Cryovast, Jack sat by a small fire, K-Rawl and Vera close by. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside there was warmth, companionship, and a shared understanding. Jack reflected on what had happened, the battles they had fought, and the bond they had forged. He knew that the Zarkans would return, stronger and more determined, but he also knew that with the wolves by his side, humanity could survive, endure, and even thrive. For the first time in years, Jack felt a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. He was no longer a lone veteran fighting against the universe. He was a part of something greater, a force that combined human ingenuity with alien strength and intelligence. Together, they could face anything, survive anything, and fight back against oppression. Cryovast was no longer just a frozen wasteland. It was a proving ground, a crucible that had forged a new kind of warrior. Jack looked at K-Rawl and Vera, their glowing eyes reflecting the firelight. "We've survived this far," he thought, "and we'll survive further." Together, and as the storm raged outside, carrying the echoes of distant Zarkan patrols, Jack knew one truth above all: they were unstoppable when united. The frozen planet had tested them, shaped them, and made them stronger. And now the universe would learn that humanity, when combined with courage, trust, and the right allies, was a force to be reckoned with. The frozen winds of Cryovast had eased slightly, but the cold was still biting, a constant reminder of the planet's unforgiving nature. Jack Harrow sat inside the small cavern that had become their temporary refuge, sharpening his blaster and checking the traps they had set. K-Rawl and Vera moved around him, their bodies coiled with energy, alert yet calm. The events of the last battles weighed heavily on Jack. He had survived ambushes and hunts before, but nothing compared to what he had endured with the wolves. They had fought side by side, outsmarted the Zarkan forces, and now, for the first time in years, Jack felt a strange kind of peace. It was not permanent, he knew, but fleeting moments of peace in a universe like this were precious. Vera approached him slowly, her steps silent on the frozen floor. Jack noticed her amber eyes glowing softly in the dim light of the cavern. The telepathic presence began again, subtle at first, then stronger. She was sharing something, but not just images or emotions this time. It was more, a connection, an invitation. Jack hesitated. He had felt this bond before, brief moments when the wolves shared their instincts and memories. But this felt different, deeper, more intense. He closed his eyes and allowed it to happen. The first sensation was overwhelming. Memories and experiences flowed into his mind. Images of lush forests under alien suns, rivers that sparkled with colors he had never seen, creatures that moved with harmony and grace. He felt the wolves' joy, their laughter, their freedom before the Zarkans destroyed their home. Then came the horror, images of fire and energy beams, cries of panic, and the loss of family and friends. Jack's chest tightened, but he did not pull away. He felt their pain, their fear, and their unbroken spirit. And in return, they felt his memories, his battles, the losses of comrades, and the relentless determination that had kept him alive on countless worlds. The bond left him breathless, but also stronger. His senses felt sharper, his reflexes quicker, and his mind more alert. The wolves seemed to sense the same change, moving closer to him, synchronized in a way that went beyond instinct. They were no longer just companions, they were extensions of himself. Together, they were a single unit, a force that combined human cunning with alien agility and perception. Jack knew that this bond could be their greatest advantage. The Zarkans were relentless, and their next encounter would be far more dangerous. But with this deeper connection, they could anticipate movements, plan strategies instinctively, and react faster than any enemy could. He also realized something else. The bond was not just about survival. It was about understanding, empathy, and trust. Humanity, he thought, had always been underestimated. Alone, a human could achieve much, but together with allies like K-Rawl and Vera, they could accomplish the impossible. Over the next few days, they tested their abilities in small skirmishes and exercises. Jack guided the wolves through mock ambushes, refining their coordination, while they taught him to perceive the environment in new ways. He learned to read the subtle shifts in snow patterns, detect vibrations under the ice, and sense the approach of distant patrols. The bond enhanced his skills and instincts, making him more efficient, more capable. The wolves, in turn, adapted to human methods of combat, understanding strategy and tactics in a way that made them even more formidable. Despite the progress, Jack remained cautious. The Zarkans would adapt, and Cryovast, harsh as it was, could not contain the threat forever. He needed more than skills, he needed a plan. The wolves communicated again, this time showing him a vision of a possible sanctuary, an abandoned research station buried under the ice, stocked with supplies and advanced technology. It was a risky journey, but it offered them a chance to regroup and strengthen themselves. Jack agreed. The journey to the station was treacherous. The winds howled, reducing visibility to mere meters, and the ice beneath their feet threatened to give way at any moment. But the bond between Jack and the wolves guided them. Kairal led, sensing the most stable paths, while Vera stayed close, communicating warnings of weak ice or hidden crevasses. Jack moved with confidence, trusting their instincts as much as his own. Along the way, they encountered remnants of Zarkan forces, scavenging patrols and automated drones. Each encounter tested their coordination and reflexes. Jack triggered traps and ambushes with precision, while the wolves moved like shadows, striking from angles the enemies could not anticipate. They survived each encounter, but the intensity reminded Jack that their fight was far from over. Every victory was temporary, every moment of peace fragile. By the time they reached the research station, they were exhausted but intact. The structure was partially buried in ice, its once shiny metal walls dulled and weathered by centuries of storms. Jack and the wolves worked quickly to clear the entrance and gain access to the interior. Inside, they found technology and supplies that could significantly enhance their abilities: energy weapons, survival gear, and data logs detailing Zarkan operations across multiple systems. It was a treasure trove of knowledge, a chance to turn the tide of their ongoing battle. As they explored, the bond between Jack and the wolves deepened further. They shared memories of the station's former occupants, the scientific experiments conducted there, and even the small joys and fears of life before Cryovast claimed it. Jack realized that understanding each other's pasts made them stronger, more cohesive as a unit. They were no longer just allies fighting for survival. They were a team with a purpose, united by trust and shared experience. But peace, even in the station, was fleeting. A distant energy signature alerted Jack to a massive Zarkan patrol moving in their direction. They had been followed. The patrol was larger than any they had faced before, well-armed and relentless. Jack felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, but this time he was not alone. The wolves sensed the danger as intensely as he did, and the bond allowed them to coordinate their response before the enemy arrived. Jack devised a plan. Using the station's technology, he could create temporary barriers and traps, funneling the Zarkans into a narrow canyon outside the station. The wolves would lead the enemy, striking with precision while Jack controlled the environment. It was a high-risk plan, but the bond made it possible. They could anticipate each other's movements, react instantly, and exploit weaknesses that would have been impossible to detect individually. When the Zarkans arrived, the battle erupted in a flurry of snow, ice, and energy blasts. The wolves moved like phantoms, striking from hidden positions, while Jack manipulated the station's technology to control the battlefield. The enemy was caught off guard by the level of coordination between human and alien. Every move was anticipated, every counterattack predicted. The patrol, despite its advanced training and technology, began to falter under the relentless, synchronized assault. During the fight, Jack experienced something extraordinary. The bond with the wolves allowed him to perceive threats before they materialized, anticipate the Zarkans' tactics, and react with near-perfect timing. Kairal struck with lethal precision, taking out heavily armored units, while Vera neutralized drones and sabotaged enemy equipment. Jack's own skills were amplified, his reflexes faster, his focus sharper. Together, they were unstoppable. By the end of the battle, the Zarkan patrol was destroyed or forced to retreat. The station was secure, and Jack and the wolves had survived yet again. They took a moment to catch their breath, to process the magnitude of what they had accomplished. The bond between them had grown stronger, deeper, and more resilient. They were more than a human and two wolves. They were a single unit, capable of facing even greater threats together. As the night fell over Cryovast, Jack and the wolves gathered inside the station, reviewing the data they had recovered. Maps, patrol schedules, and tactical information about Zarkan operations filled the screens. Jack realized that the knowledge they now possessed could change the course of the fight, not just for themselves, but for countless other survivors across the galaxy. The bond they shared was their greatest weapon, but information, strategy, and preparation would be just as crucial. Jack looked at K-Rawl and Vera, their glowing eyes reflecting the dim light of the station. "We've come this far," he thought, "and we'll go further." The bond, the trust, the shared experiences, they had transformed them into more than survivors. They were a force to be reckoned with, capable of striking back against the Zarkan Empire and protecting those who could not defend themselves. Cryovast, harsh and frozen, had tested them, pushed them to the brink, and forged them into something extraordinary. The universe beyond would soon learn that humanity, when united with courage, trust, and capable allies, could rise against even the most overwhelming odds. And with K-Rawl and Vera by his side, Jack knew that they were ready for whatever the Zarkans would throw at them next. The storm outside continued to howl, but inside the station there was warmth, strategy, and unity. Jack understood the path ahead would be dangerous, but for the first time in years he felt confident, not just in his own survival, but in the strength of the team they had become. Together, human and alien, they could endure anything, fight anything, and inspire hope in a universe that had almost forgotten what courage and resilience looked like. And so, as the twin sons of Cryovast dipped below the horizon, Jack, K-Rawl, and Vera prepared for the battles yet to come. The Zarkan Empire would not stop, but neither would they. Cryovast had shaped them, the bond had strengthened them, and the universe had yet to witness the full force of their combined strength. The fight was far from over, but Jack knew one truth above all. Together, they were unstoppable. The frozen winds of Cryovast had become almost routine for Jack Harrow, K-Rawl, and Vera, yet the calm before the storm always carried a sharp edge. Jack stood at the entrance of the hidden research station, surveying the endless white plains that stretched beyond the horizon. The battle with the last Zarkan patrol had taught him something crucial. Victory was never guaranteed, and the enemy was relentless. But now, armed with knowledge, strategy, and the unbreakable bond with the wolves, he felt more prepared than ever. The twin sons of Cryovast cast pale light over the snow, turning the ice into a sparkling battlefield that awaited their next move. The data recovered from the station provided a crucial advantage. Jack studied maps and patrol schedules, identifying weak points in the Zarkan network. They were advancing systematically across star systems, seeking to control and dominate, leaving destruction in their wake. Yet every pattern had flaws, every force had a blind spot, and Jack intended to exploit them. K-Rawl and Vera circled the station, their senses alert, perceiving dangers invisible to human eyes. Jack could feel their focus, the bond amplifying his own awareness. They were ready. Suddenly, a faint vibration ran through the ice. Jack froze, listening. The Zarkans had detected something, likely the remnants of previous encounters, and were advancing faster than expected. He turned to the wolves. K-Rawl growled softly, indicating a shift in the patrol's direction. Vera pressed her head against his chest, sending a wave of calm determination. The bond they shared allowed Jack to anticipate their next moves without a word spoken. They were no longer just allies, they were extensions of each other. Jack devised a plan. The nearby ice canyon offered the perfect advantage. It was narrow, steep, and treacherous, making it an ideal trap for the approaching Zarkan forces. The station's energy barriers could be used to funnel them into the canyon, where explosives and ice traps would give Jack and the wolves the upper hand. Every detail was critical, and timing would determine the outcome. The bond with the wolves allowed Jack to coordinate perfectly, anticipating their moves and integrating his own actions seamlessly. The first Zarkan scouts appeared on the horizon, hovering low over the snow. Jack took a deep breath, steadying his hands and his mind. Vera leapt into position, her body almost invisible against the white expanse. K-Rawl flanked the canyon, ready to strike from above. Jack triggered the initial traps, sending shards of ice into the air. The patrol faltered, their formation disrupted, and the wolves moved with lethal precision. Vera struck from the shadows, taking down advanced drones and disrupting energy shields, while K-Rawl attacked from above, forcing the enemy into the canyon's trap. Jack advanced carefully, using the station's technology to manipulate energy barriers and create diversions. The bond with the wolves allowed him to act with instincts faster than thought, predicting enemy movements before they occurred. The Zarkans, technologically superior as they were, could not adapt fast enough. Every strike was anticipated, every retreat calculated. Snow, ice, and wind became allies, masking their movements and amplifying their impact. Together, they were a force unlike any the universe had encountered. The battle intensified. Energy blasts tore through ice walls, and snow clouds reduced visibility to almost zero. Jack moved with precision, his blaster striking when necessary, while the wolves executed maneuvers that seemed impossible. Kairal leapt across a narrow ice ridge, taking down two heavily armored Zarkan units, while Vera disabled the patrol's command drone with a perfectly timed strike. Jack felt exhilaration and focus unlike anything he had experienced before. This was not just survival, it was mastery, a demonstration of the synergy between human ingenuity and alien instinct. Despite their advantage, the Zarkans adapted quickly. New drones appeared, deploying advanced energy nets designed to trap and immobilize targets. Jack reacted instantly, using the wolves' abilities to anticipate the net's deployment. Kairal and Vera moved in unison, intercepting drones, creating openings for Jack to strike. The battle became a dance of death and survival, each move critical, each second vital. Cryovast's frozen landscape was transformed into a deadly chessboard, and Jack, with his allies, was the master player. Hours passed, but the assault did not relent. The Zarkans were relentless, adapting and recalculating with every failure. Yet Jack and the wolves remained undeterred. The bond between them allowed them to anticipate enemy strategies, exploit weaknesses, and execute complex maneuvers that no single being could manage alone. Jack marveled at their coordination, at the intelligence and courage of creatures he had once thought merely animal. They had evolved together, each learning from the other, and together they were unstoppable. Then came the moment of revelation. In the chaos of battle, Jack discovered a hidden Zarkan command beacon transmitting signals to distant fleets. If they were not destroyed, the Zarkans could call reinforcements, overwhelming any hope of resistance. Jack signaled to the wolves. Kairal understood immediately, darting toward the beacon with unparalleled speed and precision. Vera created a distraction, drawing enemy attention away from Jack as he prepared explosives. The plan required perfect timing, flawless coordination, and absolute trust. The beacon was heavily guarded, but the wolves' instincts and Jack's strategic mind allowed them to bypass most defenses. Kairal struck the final guards with deadly efficiency, while Vera disabled security measures. Jack planted the explosives and retreated to a safe distance. Seconds later, a controlled detonation obliterated the beacon, severing communications and ensuring the Zarkan reinforcements would not arrive. The battlefield fell silent, save for the howling wind and distant echoes of retreating patrols. Jack collapsed onto the snow, exhausted but triumphant. Kairal and Vera joined him, pressing close, sharing warmth and a sense of relief. They had survived not by luck, but through trust, coordination, and the bond that had grown between them. Jack realized that this bond was the true weapon, more powerful than any technology or strategy. It combined instinct, intelligence, and emotion into a force the Zarkans could not anticipate or counter. As the sun rose over Cryovast, casting golden light over the frozen plains, Jack reflected on what had happened. The Zarkans had underestimated humanity, as they always did. But Jack and his alien allies had proven that courage, intelligence, and trust could overcome even the most technologically advanced enemy. The bond between species had amplified their strengths, minimized weaknesses, and turned survival into mastery. Cryovast had tested them, pushed them to the brink, and forged them into something extraordinary. With the beacon destroyed and the immediate threat neutralized, Jack began planning their next move. The Zarkan Empire would not give up. They were relentless, adaptive, and determined. But Jack now had something they could not predict: the bond, the synergy between human and alien, and the experience of surviving impossible odds. Together, they could continue to strike, sabotage, and protect others from the Empire's cruelty. They were no longer merely survivors. They were a force of resistance, a symbol of hope for anyone under threat. The wolves moved around the station, exploring and securing it further. Jack observed them, feeling a profound sense of respect and admiration. Kairal, with his strength and precision, was unmatched in combat, while Vera, with her intelligence and agility, could outmaneuver any enemy. And together, through the bond, they amplified each other's abilities, creating a unity that no force in the galaxy could easily break. Jack knew that this partnership was more than survival, it was evolution. Humanity, when united with allies who trusted and understood each other, could achieve feats beyond imagination. In the following days, Jack and the wolves prepared for the next phase. They scavenged supplies, repaired equipment, and studied Zarkan movements. Every action was deliberate, every plan calculated. The universe was vast and the Zarkans were numerous, but Jack understood something crucial. Numbers alone did not guarantee victory. Strategy, adaptation, and the willingness to act with trust and courage were the real determinants of survival. The bond had given him this insight, and he intended to use it to its fullest. The final test came sooner than expected. A massive Zarkan fleet arrived in the sector, attempting to reclaim the area and destroy any survivors. Jack observed the fleet through binoculars, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline. The stakes had never been higher. Failure meant death not just for him and the wolves, but potentially for countless others. But Jack was not afraid. He had faced overwhelming odds before and survived. Now he had allies, intelligence, and a bond that transcended species. They were ready. As the Zarkan fleet descended, Jack activated the traps and barriers he had prepared. The wolves moved with him, striking with unmatched precision. The battlefield became a whirlwind of ice, energy, and strategy. The Zarkans, powerful and numerous, found themselves overwhelmed by the coordinated attacks, ambushes, and unexpected tactics. Jack felt a sense of exhilaration and clarity. Every movement was synchronized, every decision informed by the bond, every action amplifying their collective strength. Hours of intense combat passed, but finally the Zarkan fleet was forced to retreat. The ice plains were silent, save for the howling wind and the soft breathing of Jack and the wolves. They had survived, and more than that, they had triumphed against overwhelming odds. Jack stood, surveying the horizon, feeling a deep sense of pride. Cryovast had tested them, shaped them, and strengthened them. Humanity, when combined with courage, intelligence, and trustworthy allies, could rise against even the most formidable foes. As the twin suns dipped below the horizon, Jack, Karol, and Vera stood together, united and triumphant. The universe had witnessed the power of survival, trust, and courage. They had proven that even in the harshest conditions, humanity could inspire loyalty, forge bonds across species, and achieve feats beyond imagination. Jack looked at his companions, feeling gratitude, respect, and hope. Together they had faced the impossible, survived, and emerged stronger. The frozen plains of Cryovast stretched endlessly before them, but Jack knew they were ready for whatever lay ahead. The Zarkans would return, the universe would challenge them, but the bond they shared, the lessons they had learned, and the courage they had displayed would guide them. Humanity, when united with allies who trusted and understood each other, was unstoppable. And with Karol and Vera by his side, Jack knew that no force in the galaxy could break their spirit. As night fell, the three companions settled near the station, preparing for the next challenge. The battle was far from over, but hope had been rekindled. Cryovast had been their crucible, the bond their weapon, and humanity their strength. And as the stars shone above the frozen plains, Jack Harrow understood one undeniable truth. Together, human and alien, they were more than survivors. They were a force that could change the universe.